Over the course of the latest chapters of the One Punch Man series, there has been a lot of discussion about Saitama's true power and his ability to limitlessly adapt to any given situation. And of course, there's the regularly scheduled Goku comparisons in terms of power scaling. Now, while these are completely valid discussions and arguments to be had, unfortunately, there isn't enough light being shed on the true capabilities of what most would consider the main antagonist of the story up until this point. And while Garou served his purpose in the story of showing just how limitlessly overpowered Saitama is, Garou's power progression throughout the story isn't one to just be brushed aside, as he's the only character in the entire series whose exponential growth has come close enough to Saitama for a comparison to even be considered. And while ultimately Saitama's powers continued to grow and inarguably dwarfed that of Cosmic Fear Mode Garou, Garou was able to match a certain level of power that to all heroes and monsters that we have encountered in the series so far was pretty much insurmountable. So, today we are going to be delving into the One Punch Man universe to answer the question, just how strong was Cosmic Fear Mode Garou? Alright, so before we delve into the specifics of Cosmic Garou's full arsenal of abilities and answer the main question of this video, it's only fair that I give a brief rundown of how this video is going to go. So, firstly, we're going to discuss what Cosmic Fear Mode actually is. As over the course of the One Punch Man manga, we've seen Garou don numerous exciting and cool transformations. After that, we will then proceed to break down the various new and a lot of the old but enhanced techniques that Garou displayed using this form. And finally, the cumulative significance of all these feats in terms of Garou's strength and potential as it relates to the One Punch Man series. We first get to see Cosmic Fear Mode Garou at the end of chapter 162 of the One Punch Man manga, and we instantly know based on the design of the form that Garou has attained an entirely new league of power, unlike anything we had ever seen before. Garou awakened this mode after being partially imparted with power from a being we now know as the evil god of the One Punch Man universe. A omniscient being notorious for granting pieces of its seemingly unlimited power to those it deems worthy in order to try to manipulate them to do its bidding. And it does this through a sort of ritual called a blessing. We have now seen multiple examples of this with the dragon level threats Homeless Emperor and Psychos, with Homeless Emperor literally being raised to a dragon level threat from just being a regular homeless man. We also know that this entity is trapped somewhere within the known universe, potentially the moon, as we have seen shots and manga panels depicting its imprisonment. And we also know that it is desperate to be released, as it has had several failed attempts at impartation of its power, like with the number 2 S-Class hero, Terrible Tornado. Okay, now that that's out of the way, we understand based on explanation that Garou's Cosmic Fear Mode is a nigh-complete impartation of this evil god's power, and even though Garou sought to reject this blessing, merely coming into contact with this being was enough to grant Garou the highest amount of this divine energy that we had seen in the series so far. Enough for this entity to consider Garou its earthly emissary. And though Garou throughout the entire transformation thought he was in control of his actions, we later find out that there was some level of influence from this being, as Garou came to be described as having the fists of a god. Now, in addition to the insane physical buffs that came with the acquisition of this divine power, which will become apparent later, there were certain traits that were interestingly unique to Garou alone, as Garou, through his mastery of the Fist of Flowing Water Crush Rock technique, which is entirely based on controlling undulating and rotational forces, he was able to awaken an understanding of the flow of cosmic forces. This means that Garou in this state was able to understand and master the flow of all the different types of energy in the known universe. Now, this understanding would be made apparent and put on full display in the sorts of techniques that Garou chose to adopt in his cosmic form, such as the gamma ray burst, the nuclear fission fist, and also his ability to instantly master any techniques and mimic any opponents. Now, Garou in this awakened state had achieved his dream of becoming absolute evil that terrorizes both heroes and monsters, effectively rising to the status of threat level god, a never before seen threat level in the history of the One Punch Man universe. Now, I know there are still a lot of Boros fans out there who might claim he was a god level threat based on the prophecy of an earth shattering calamity the Hero Association would have to face right before Boros' arrival. But in all honesty, he was never directly stated to be a god level threat by anybody, and based on the power progression of the series, I would put Boros as a dragon level threat at best. So I hope this clears up any arguments or confusion that anybody had. Now, moving on, Garou's ascension to his new status became evident when not even the S-class heroes, who were considered to be the best and the strongest that the Hero Association has to offer, could stand in his presence. And this was just due to Garou's sheer amount of cosmic radiation that was emanating from his body. Now, there were a few who were resistant, such as the number 1 S-rank hero Blast, and Garou's former master Bang, who was not entirely resistant, but was strong enough to stand in Garou's presence, and Genos, who is a cyborg. Alright guys, before we get into specific abilities, if you've made it this far into the video, please drop a like and hit the subscribe button, as it takes a lot of effort to make these videos, and liking the video is a free and yet direct way of supporting the channel. We also have a lot more interesting content planned, so please be sure to hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on anything. Okay, so without further ado, getting into all the abilities Garou displays in his Cosmic Fear mode, the first and one of the more fascinating abilities to me wasn't any of his attacks, surprisingly, but it was his ability to read the flow of someone's thoughts. Yes, you heard that right. Through his understanding of the flow of all things, Garou was able to read the flow of Genos' thoughts to find out about the master-student relationship that existed between Genos and Saitama. This piece of information ultimately led to Genos' untimely death in an attempt to draw out Saitama's full power, leading to a series of events the fandom now describes as the Dark Timeline. In addition to being able to read the flow of all energy and thoughts, Garou's attack arsenal became seriously terrifying, with one of his initial attacks being the radioactive nuclear fission fist, and his new perfected martial art now being called the Fist of Eradicating All Life Forms. The nuclear fission fist is a punch powered by purely radioactive energy large enough to cause explosions of cataclysmic sizes. And speaking of explosions, Garou in this form is able to perform something called the gamma ray burst, and interestingly enough, this technique was explained in the manga, so I don't really understand why there's even a debate as to whether Garou and Saitama are star level, but we'll come back to that point later. But for the sake of those who haven't read it or who missed the explanation the first time, a gamma ray burst is a massive explosion of energy that is released upon the death of a giant star. It's the most powerful type of explosion known to man, and Garou is able to casually perform this. Following his display of these techniques, Garou then encounters the enigmatic number 1 S-class hero, Blast, who acknowledges Cosmic Garou as a casually planetary level threat, as his radiation alone threatened the survival of all life on Earth. And Blast, thinking to himself, also recognized that there might have to be a battle between him and Garou, as two beings that manipulate the reality of the cosmos to vie for supremacy. Over the course of this encounter, Garou was able to instantly copy and adapt some of Blast's techniques, such as the Gravity Knuckle and the interdimensional hyperspace portals, which greatly improved his already beyond light speed mobility. And he was able to seamlessly incorporate and combine these techniques with his own in normal Garou fashion to make them even more devastating than they originally were. For example, he combined the nuclear fission with the gravity knuckle he copied from Blast to create the nuclear fission gravity knuckle. It's pretty interesting to see Garou absorb techniques from his opponents over the course of his various encounters, as the next significant increase in Garou's arsenal was in his incorporation of Saitama's consecutive normal punches and serious punch. He does this while copying Saitama in a mode he aptly named Saitama mode. Now, the resulting force of Saitama and Garou's combined Serious Punch Square, was enough to destroy a cluster of stars. Okay, so there has been a lot of debate about this in particular, and whether the gaping hole in outer space means the stars were destroyed or were just moved aside. But I think we all honestly know what Murata was trying to convey here. But moving on, for the rest of Garou's battle against Sirius Saitama, which took place on one of Jupiter's moons, he didn't really acquire any new techniques, but gave a jaw-dropping display of all his combined techniques, from exploding heart liberation to roaring key-rending air. As the intense battle went on, there were a few revelations as to just how deep Garou's proverbial well of powers ran, and there were also a lot of revelations for Saitama as well. But for the sake of this video, the focus will remain on Garou. The first of these revelations was the fact that Garou could withstand a barrage of killer move Serious series attacks from Saitama, such as the Serious Table Flip, Serious Punches, and the Omnidirectional Serious Punch, and could also somewhat keep up against the most serious and invested in a fight we have ever seen Saitama. And while the fight was thrilling and exciting, as we saw Garou attempt to limitlessly copy Saitama, sadly for Garou, Saitama's powers, even throughout the course of their fight, continued to grow, making it impossible for Garou to effectively catch up. Without going into each and every minute detail about how Garou counters, adapts to, and most impressively reacts to Saitama's ridiculous displays of power, I've decided to end this video by talking about Cosmic Garou's final and ultimate martial arts skill, time travel. Now, after the conclusion of his battle with Saitama, which he inevitably lost, Garou, upon witnessing Tario's lifeless body, fully comes to his senses and opts to teach Saitama his ultimate skill, in order to attempt to undo all the death and destruction he had caused since he attained his Cosmic Fear mode. In order to accomplish this, Garou asks that Saitama mirror his every move, as they both imagine their inner universes down to the subatomic level and cause their particles and antiparticles to move in the opposite directions, and doing this effectively caused Saitama to travel back in time. Ultimately, Garou had his powers and life taken from him by this evil god entity, but not as repercussions for performing as taboo a technique as time travel directly, but as a form of discipline for Garou's defiance. Now, well, when it's all said and done, it is completely safe to say that Garou is the second most powerful character we have seen in the entirety of the One Punch Man series. He was able to reach the peak of martial arts and just surpass that multiple times over, and the whole fight was insane. If you haven't read it, I suggest you do. And yeah, well, that's it for today's video, guys. Don't forget to hit that like button on your way out and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our content, and have an awesome day.